Hi everyone, Akshita here, president and founder of the Revival Zine National. Our expansion team decided to put together this inclusivity training for new chapters, but we also encourage anyone else who might find it useful for their organizations or personal use or friends or anything like that to forward it accordingly. This is a guide for how to be inclusive, what resources we're offering, what are Revival's values, and what is intersectional feminism, and how to be inclusive in general, as well as a kind of rundown of how to combat implicit biases and how to implement inclusivity into the daily occurrences in your chapter or organization. The beginning of this video really quickly is going to run through Revival specific resources for chapters and Revival values, but the rest of this video will be for general use. Starting off with the documents and resources that we're offering to chapters. So we have a very comprehensive list of vocabulary, and this is actually the only resource. It is available to anyone on our website linked below, and this has all the different terminology that we could think of in terms of, pronouns or gender or many different things that, entering the world of social justice and feminism, depending on your background, maybe you have never heard of before. So I encourage everyone to look through this list and really educate yourself and make sure that you're aware of these terms. And even if you don't memorize them, which I'm not expecting anyone to do, you do have this list to refer to in the future. So it can help you kind of develop that perspective for how to view things. And then other resources that we do have. We have a campus recruitment packet, we have an onboarding packet for founders, branding guidelines, outreach advice, and then chapter member recruitment packet. And we also have a doc called Get Started First Steps and Recruitment Tips. A little bit of what we talk about in this inclusivity training will be sprinkled throughout all of these resources. Again, these are for chapters only, but the vocab is available to all. Now we're going to jump into Revival values and what the heart of this organization is, because I think that's really critical to remember all the time. I don't want these to kind of be buzzwords or a description and then we ignore them when we're actually thinking about how we're recruiting and how we're having our logistics every day and how we treat other members. I think it's really important. The reason I founded Revival is, again, I've told this story a couple of times, but I didn't see much of an accessible, inclusive outlet on campus or platform for many students, especially students who feel underrepresented. And I think a big part of that is accessibility. And when I say that, I mean physical health, mental health, when we're thinking about ability, people who have disabilities. And then we're also thinking about privilege. So maybe people from different backgrounds may not have the same resources to find out about these opportunities. One aspect is Revival is about writing. We are a publication. Not everyone has the privilege to have tons of writing experience, so not many people have the confidence to apply. But another part of it was really the inclusivity. I think not only do we think about, discrimination, that type of oppression, but I think it's also important to think about, are you doing enough to reach different communities? So being inclusive to people who have different experiences than you, people who have different identities. I didn't want Revival to be a kind of organization that only looks for people who are like you and people who are your friends and bring that in. So again, for new chapters, in the beginning, I get it, it's really difficult to reach out and find new people. So, maybe the first iteration of your team is people that you're comfortable with, people that you know, but I encourage everyone to step out and really make an effort to find new members who you don't know at all, people from different backgrounds and people with different identities, like I said. So that's really the heart of what Revival is. It should offer that equal opportunity to everyone, even if they're not like you and even if they don't share the same experiences or identities. The three Revival values are voice, equity, and empowerment. So for voice, it's free speech, journalism, open discussion. So that's kind of what we're doing. That's kind of how we're trying to communicate. So again, with that, one part of the accessibility is we are going to start rolling out virtual writing workshops. And that's something that we've been thinking about doing for a long time. It's a little bit difficult in this time, but I don't think it's impossible. Not everyone has that experience with writing. So we want to make sure that we have junior editors and senior editors who can help them put their thoughts, their experiences, and their opinions into those words. And again, a lot of people think that they're bad writers. I don't think anyone's the best writer in the world. No one is a perfect writer. but at the same time, we want to make sure that they have the support that they need. The second revival value is equity. So community service, feminism, social justice. That's how we're really trying to represent as many people who feel marginalized as possible. I'll talk a little bit more about intersectional feminism, which is what that is the identity of our organization. But community service, it is a little bit difficult to get that off the ground during COVID-19. But I do want to make sure that we have those opportunities where, to be as inclusive as possible, we go out in the community and we're actually making a difference. While our writing and advocacy is very important, I think we have to take that extra step to go implement those changes. And the last but not least value is empowerment. So student support, writing education, minority elevation. I touched on this with the writing workshops. But I also want to make sure that with Revival, we're really thinking about how can we represent and support students, whether that's just being empathetic or whether that's going out of our way to make sure that students feel represented. That can show up in a lot of different ways. So I think it's really important to remember these three values and kind of have that lens when you're thinking about what sort of events should we do on campus, what sort of pieces should we write? Who should we reach out to? How do we recruit? Revisit them. And I think that will help you come up with inspiration for how to uphold inclusivity in your organizations. The official definition for what Revival is that we are an intersectional feminist online magazine for college students and by college students. We work to engage young people, to advocate for social change, and really try to get everyone to reclaim their voices by giving them this platform. So intersectional feminism is a term that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. And the official definition, I encourage you to check out one of her talks, but what it is a prism for seeing the way in which various forms of inequality often operate together and exacerbate each other. What that basically means is, we have all these different aspects of identity and also ways that discrimination can manifest. So race, gender, class, sexuality, even age, things like that. And the thing with intersectional feminism is that these can overlap and kind of create an even more negative form of oppression. So for example, if you're a woman of color, you might have two different types of discrimination operating against you. So your experience is very specific and different because of the intersectionality of maybe sexism and racism. So I think it's really important to keep in mind what the intersection of these different types of discrimination towards different types of identities might create. That felt very complicated, so I understand if it's difficult to grasp, but what it basically means is let's look at feminism as intersectional. Let's not only look at it as simply for one type of woman. Back in the mid-1900s, where it was only, feminism was really geared towards white women, and that's a very small group. So we want to make sure that we're being as inclusive as possible by being intersectional. And that's what we're really trying to do with Revival. I want to run through some do's and don'ts because I think that could be really helpful, and maybe just give you some specific examples when you're running your organization or just in general of how to be inclusive. So these are things that I've seen personally and maybe not everyone knows. So some do's: do use pronouns. Don't assume people's pronouns. Get really comfortable with saying, hi, my name is Akshita, my pronouns are she, her, hers, blah, 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 and go on. And just kind of make sure that you use that all the time to normalize that, because not everyone does identify with just she, hers, and he, him. There is also they, them. So I think it's really important to leave that space open and normalize everyone talking about their pronouns. And instead of saying you guys, I think say y'all. It's really fun, and I think it is much more inclusive. Do pay attention to mental health as well. That's one aspect of accessibility and inclusivity. So don't neglect your mental health or other people's mental health. I understand with any organization or anything, there's so many things that have to be done that it's easy to kind of put aside your own mental health or things that are going on and almost expect other people to do the same as well. So if you are leading an organization, a chapter Revival, or whatever else it may be, make sure that you're asking people how they're doing. Something that we do is, we say high and low of the week. What was your high of the week? What was your low of the week? So we just kind of ask and see what's going on. People can share as much or as little as they want. So if they want to share, I baked bread today, I loved it, that's wholesome, and we love that. And I think it's awesome to hear about. That's a great way to connect. And if someone's really having a bad week and they say, this very tragic thing happened in my life, I think it almost helps them to kind of open up a little bit. And I think it's really important to have that. So in every one of our weekly meetings, we do that. It takes up 5 to 10 minutes, but I don't think of it as, oh, it's taking up so much time. I think it's a very necessary part of building, a kind of team instead of just a group of disjointed people who don't really connect together. Do ask questions. I think it's very important to realize that maybe even as a leader or just a member or anything, you don't know everything. Nobody does, and that's fine. I think it's really important to educate yourself, do your research, ask questions, be open-minded, keep thinking about, okay, like I don't really understand what that is. Let me go Google it. Okay, I still don't understand it. Let me ask someone else. Moving on to the don'ts, don't rely on someone to educate you about their identity. That can be very exhausting for someone. It's a lot of pressure. While it's okay to maybe once in a while be like, I don't know what this is. Can you tell me about it? Or there's a situation that arose. Like, how should I approach it? But if you're constantly doing that, I think that is unfair to any person to have to take on that load. There are so many resources online, so I encourage you, if you're having constant issues grasping a concept, to look at YouTube videos or to read some articles, or there's so much content online that I think you should rely on that more instead of relying on people if it's kind of an ongoing thing. If you do make a mistake, misgendering someone, not knowing about something, anything like that, don't over apologize. Just kind of be like, oh, I'm sorry, or oh, I apologize, and then correct yourself. So if you misgender someone as she, hers when they go by they, them, then just be like, if they correct you or someone else does, oh, I'm really sorry, they, them, or, correct yourself in the future. May take a few tries, it's fine, just make sure that you're making that change. Now, this last don't is a little bit complex, and I think it takes some time to figure out, some experience. It's not something that you can just get right on the first try, but don't confuse inclusivity with someone neglecting their responsibilities. One example of that is, I think it's always best to assume that people have the best intentions and to assume that people need that sort of inclusive environment. If someone has something going on, maybe they can't make meetings, and I think it's best to, set those guidelines and make sure that you've created a space where they feel safe to tell you and communicate. Sometimes you'll have to reach out to people and explain, okay, if you have stuff going on, that's all right, but please do let me know, at least ahead of time. Something that I've noticed is when people are very passionate about what they're working on with Revival or any other project, they do, whatever is going on, they do make that extra step to communicate honestly with you. So I feel like that's where you see that divergence of people who have stuff going on, where you have to give them that space, maybe for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, and that's fine because people have things going on, versus someone who is just neglecting their responsibilities. So try to identify patterns. I think that's the biggest thing. If things come up too much, have honest conversations with people. Never assume the worst. Just try to ask them, I've noticed this is going on. Can we talk about it? We have this space. I hope that you know that you can come and talk to me about this. And, sometimes people may not. And at the end of the day, if it seems like it's not one issue, it's this recurring occurrence where people are continually neglecting Revival or anything else, then you do have to tell them maybe you need to take some time off and come back if you are passionate or if you really do have the time. That's something that, billion-dollar companies struggle with, finding that line between being inclusive yet making sure that people are being held to their responsibilities. Luckily, our team so far, everyone is just passionate about what they're doing. I don't think I've ever really had to worry about that. It's come up maybe once and that's it. But that was pretty easy to identify because of the patterns. Now, our very last point, but still a very important point, is implicit bias. So the official definition of implicit bias is the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. It's basically the bias and the approach that we have to things, and it's completely subconscious, so we don't really realize that we have that. And I think based on our different experiences, backgrounds, and privileges, we may view things differently than other people. And I think sometimes it is easy to kind of slip into a zone of not understanding someone's situation or making judgment and being biased against them when we don't really know what's going on and we don't have the education to understand. With implicit bias, no one is at fault, but it is very, very important to kind of have the self-awareness to understand that you have bias, because everybody has bias. Some people say, I don't see color. You need to see color to see the patterns in society of how people are treated differently based on their color. So the same way with bias, you need to understand that you and everyone else has bias in order to see the patterns and try to make a change. So it's really about being self-aware enough to educate yourself, educate other people, and keep on learning. Have that passion for trying to do better. And oftentimes, it's not about the first thought that comes into your head, because that's what you've been taught and raised, and maybe that's just what you've been around. You know, the environment that you've had has trained you to have that first thought. It's really about the second thought, which is after you've educated yourself and after you've checked yourself and thought, okay, this is my implicit bias. Let me try to think about this other person's perspectives and put myself in their shoes. I hope this training was useful. We do have all these resources below, and for chapters, if you have any questions, something specific comes up, y'all have my number, so text me or email us at therevivalzine@gmail.com. If we do have more things to add to this training, we may upload a new video or create a part 2. So we will send chapters a little short quiz to make sure that this was useful and you got some good information from it. And I think that's pretty much it for today. We're very excited to roll out so many new things for our chapters, including, you know, the writing workshops and how that's gonna work, community service opportunities, so on and so forth, and making sure that everyone is enabled to be as inclusive as possible and create these communities on their campus. Thank you all for watching this video. Stay safe, practice self-care, and welcome to Revival if you're a part of Revival. If not, thank you for watching this video too.